In Syria today, U.S.-backed fighters declared victory over the Islamic State, saying the terrorist group no longer holds land in the country.
The desert never sleeps, even in the dead of night.
And now to Syria, where U.S. forces carried out a pre-dawn raid targeting a member of the Islamic State or ISIS.
The wind cuts across the sand, carrying whispers of old battles and new threats. On a moonless evening in northern Syria, a convoy of matte black vehicles rolled silently across the dunes. Inside sat U.S. Special Forces operators, their faces hidden behind night vision goggles, their rifles cradled tight against their chests. They were headed toward a name whispered in intelligence briefings for months: Al-Daram, an ISIS stronghold fortified like a fortress, defended by hundreds of fighters, and rumored to contain command networks, weapons caches, and high-value leaders. The mission was clear: break the stronghold, dismantle ISIS's presence in the region, and capture or kill the emir who ruled from within. What wasn't clear was how long it would take. Intelligence suggested days, maybe more. The men prepared for 5 of the longest days of their lives. Day 1, infiltration and contact. The convoy halted 3 miles out. Engines killed, silence fell heavy. From here, it would be foot patrols and shadows. Drones buzzed unseen overhead, their thermal lenses painting an invisible map of enemy positions. The operators moved in staggered formation, boots sinking into sand, their breaths steady and quiet. Every man knew what was waiting ahead. Fighters dug into concrete bunkers, hidden snipers, and improvised explosive devices laced through the village outskirts. At 0200 hours, the first contact came. A forward scout spotted movement, 2 armed sentries, whispering at the edge of a ruined building. A silenced shot cracked the night. One dropped instantly, the other barely turned before a second bullet found him. The bodies were dragged into the shadows, and the patrol continued. Minutes later, a ripple of chaos. A tripwire triggered. The explosion was small, but enough to alert the compound. Alarms rose in the distance. Dogs barked. Gunfire erupted from the village walls. The element of surprise was gone. The commander, Captain Davis, barked into his headset. Initiate assault. Phase 1. The night sky lit up as mortars fired from hidden U.S. positions outside the stronghold. The first shells slammed into defensive walls, sending concrete and bodies flying. ISIS fighters poured from buildings, AKs spitting into the dark. The Special Forces team advanced, firing controlled bursts, clearing house by house. By dawn, the outer perimeter was theirs, but the stronghold's core loomed ahead, a maze of tunnels and barricades that would take more than one night to crack. Day 2, the stronghold holds. With the sun came heat and a different battle. The Special Forces operators dug in on the captured perimeter, fortifying their gains while drones circled overhead. Inside the stronghold, ISIS fighters regrouped. Sniper fire began to pick off soldiers who strayed too close. A U.S. medic dragged one wounded man back to cover, his leg torn open, blood pooling fast. Air support arrived mid-morning. F-16s screamed across the sky, dropping precision-guided bombs on identified command posts. Huge plumes of smoke rose as entire buildings collapsed. Still, the stronghold fought back. Rockets fired from hidden launchers arced into the U.S. positions. One vehicle went up in flames, sending shockwaves across the sand. The battle was turning into a war of attrition. Inside the stronghold, ISIS commanders issued orders over encrypted radios. They had survived assaults before. Their strategy was clear: bleed the attackers, stretch them thin, and wait for reinforcements from neighboring villages. They knew time was their ally. By nightfall, the second day ended with no decisive breakthrough. The Special Forces had suffered casualties, 2 dead, several wounded. Yet the perimeter was intact, and more reinforcements were moving in. The real push would begin at dawn. Day 3, breach and blood. At sunrise, the order came down: breach the stronghold. Armored vehicles rolled forward, their guns thundering. Engineers moved under fire, planting charges against reinforced gates. With a deafening roar, the gates crumpled inward. The operators surged through, splitting into fire teams, each assigned to clear sectors of the compound. The fighting was savage. ISIS fighters turned every building into a fortress. Stairwells became kill zones, windows spat machine gun fire, and tunnels delivered ambushes from below. Hand-to-hand combat broke out in narrow corridors where rifles became clubs and knives flashed in the dark. Captain Davis led one team into a 3-story building where intel suggested a communications hub. The first floor was cleared with grenades and suppressive fire. The second floor erupted in chaos as militants counterattacked, hurling grenades down stairwells. Davis's men fought upward step by bloody step. By the time they reached the third floor, 5 operators were wounded, but the hub was theirs. Laptops, radios, and hard drives were seized. A treasure trove of intelligence, but at a heavy price. Elsewhere, a helicopter gunship rained fire down on a courtyard packed with enemy fighters. The ground shook with the impact, screams echoing through the dust. The operators pressed the advantage, but exhaustion was setting in. 3 days of combat with little sleep had worn them down. Still, by sunset, the U.S. flag flew over the compound's central courtyard. The stronghold was fractured, but not finished. Day 4, the counterattack. The night was eerily quiet, too quiet. Operators rested where they could, rifles never far from hand. Then, just before dawn, the desert thundered with the sound of engines. ISIS reinforcements had arrived. Dozens of trucks mounted with heavy weapons stormed toward the stronghold. From rooftops and towers, lookouts shouted warnings. The counterattack was brutal. Waves of fighters crashed against the U.S. positions, spraying gunfire, launching rockets, and screaming battle cries. The operators responded with disciplined ferocity. Machine guns roared, mortars fired, and snipers picked off leaders one by one. The air filled with smoke and fire as both sides poured everything into the clash. Captain Davis called in air support again. Within minutes, the roar of Apaches filled the sky. Their Hellfire missiles streaked into the desert, obliterating trucks and scattering fighters. Yet the reinforcements kept coming, fueled by fanaticism and desperation. For hours, the stronghold became a cauldron of fire. By midday, the ground was littered with bodies. Hundreds of ISIS fighters lay dead or dying. The U.S. operators, battered and exhausted, held firm. The counterattack had failed, but it had shown the stakes. This wasn't just a battle for one stronghold. It was a battle for dominance in the region. Day 5, the endgame. The final day dawned with silence again, but this time it was the silence of a broken enemy. Drones showed only scattered resistance left inside the stronghold. The operators pushed forward carefully, clearing tunnels and bunkers. In one underground chamber, they found weapons caches stacked to the ceiling, RPGs, rifles, explosives, all destined for future attacks. In another, they discovered a makeshift prison where locals had been held, tortured, and executed. The horrors of ISIS rule lay bare before them. The climax came in a final raid on the command bunker. Intelligence suggested the emir himself was inside. Operators stormed the entrance, flashbangs exploding in blinding light. A fierce firefight erupted in the narrow halls. When it was over, the emir lay dead, his body riddled with bullets, his guards scattered. The stronghold had fallen. As the sun set on the 5th day, the U.S. flag flew again, not as conquest, but as a symbol that the stronghold was no more. The operators stood amidst the ruins, their faces grim, their bodies weary. They had fought 5 days of unrelenting battle, taken losses, and delivered a crippling blow to ISIS. But they knew the war was far from over. The aftermath rippled across the region. News outlets hailed the operation as a decisive victory. Politicians spoke of progress, of justice served, but the men who fought knew better. ISIS wasn't just a fortress, or a leader, or a fleet of trucks. It was an idea, one that would retreat into shadows and strike again when least expected. For the families of the fallen operators, the 5-day battle was a story of sacrifice. For the survivors, it was a story etched in memory, gunfire echoing through tunnels, comrades dragged from rubble, the faces of enemies seen through night vision green. For history, it was another chapter in the endless clash between order and terror, played out in deserts and ruins far from home.